that I'm an occupational therapist working in mental health. I work with people who have depression, bipolar, and psychotic disorders, helping them to control their symptoms and to reintegrate into their chosen career or academic activities, leisure activities, and often even basic self-care activities as well. By the way, I love my job. In order to practice my profession, there are certain requirements. I must pay my dues to my professional licensing body, called an order. Like every other healthcare professional, I'm obliged to complete a certain number of continuing education hours every year. And every year, occupational therapists are required to compile a portfolio. In the past couple of weeks, I've been going through the process of completing my portfolio for this year. It's not painful, well, that's not the idea, but it can be quite demanding and thought-provoking. In fact, I got a sermon out of it. The portfolio consists of 3 sections. Section A is specifying my learning goals for the upcoming year. Usually you have to say 2 or 3. This must include the evidence that I'll have at the end of the year to prove that I've achieved my goal, a specific time frame, and an education plan detailing how I will accomplish my goal. Section B is a list of all the continuing education activities for the past year, linked to the corresponding goals. And Section C is a personal review of how my clinical practice has changed, preferably for the better, because of the continuing education activities. So for example, 2 years ago, I had the goal of improving my clinical practice with people with addictions. I attended a 2-week training program and spent the rest of the year practicing the learned techniques. I then commented in my portfolio about how I thought the training had helped my work. So improved assessment skills, increased ability to develop rapport with my clients, better understanding of the situations my clients are experiencing, and better able to give information about their favorite substances. The goal of the portfolio is to improve clinical work, either from an advocacy perspective with clients or for the profession, or when intervening with clients. And much as I find the portfolio administration and management rather frustrating, the actual process of completing the annual portfolio is very useful. It helps me think about what I'm doing well as an occupational therapist, and it does provide room for acknowledgement of successful areas. It also provides the opportunity to recognize weaker areas in my practice and to do something about it. As I was compiling my portfolio these past couple of weeks, I started to think about other areas of life, just in general, where we have portfolios or goals with reviews. So for physical health, we are supposed to visit a GP from time to time. And a GP will tell you what your goals are for your physical health. It might be you have to take care of your blood pressure better. It might be monitoring your blood sugar. It might be that you have to decrease your cholesterol level. And your GP will tell you what your continuing education activities are going to be. It might be monitoring, taking pills, a change of eating habits, exercise, and so on. Usually there's a follow-up visit with a goal review, and the GP will give you their impression of how you've been doing. Then I thought a bit about brain health. Goals are a little less obvious because it's not such a focus in society, but concern for brain health is still present. Did you know that possibly because the #1 fear of people when considering aging is that they develop dementia? But from childhood, from even pre-childhood, in pregnancy, mom is supposed to eat well and take vitamin pills. Children, once they're eating the regular food, they eat brain food. We encourage them to wear helmets. We cover all possible surfaces so that they don't get bumps to the brain. And in later years, we're still supposed to eat healthily, limit bumps, gardening and exercise, excellent activities for the brain. By the way, exercise, if you're worried about your brain and your memory, exercise is the #1 thing that you can do. Really, I'm not making it up. Recent studies, that's what you can do. Now, there's no formal regular review for brain health, but let me assure you that if you have memory problems, your friends and family will tell you, and they will make sure that you get it checked out. And then I thought about spiritual health. Now, there's actually very little in our society, even within our church structure, to support ongoing personal spiritual development. And yet, spirituality will touch all areas of our lives because it's fundamental to who we are and how we interact with our environments. There are very few annual reviews for spirituality. No organization or person is going to ask for my spiritual portfolio. And yet if the portfolio helps me with my work, surely considering that spirituality touches all aspects of life, it would be minimally a good idea to have a spiritual portfolio. Now, there are times in the church for preparation, soul-searching, introspection, support for change in the church calendar, namely Advent and Lent, but these last 4 and 6 weeks. They're not a full year. And even if I have a Lenten goal, the point being that I practice for 6 weeks, but then I keep doing it beyond Lent, no one's going to ask me a year later, so how's that going? So then I got thinking, if we were to each put together a spiritual portfolio, what would it include? What could some of our goals be? What would the continuing education activities be? And how would we know that we'd achieved our goals? Now, some of you might say, well, what's the point of having a spiritual goal? Everything's okay. Well, our lives might seem just fine, but they can always be better. Now, back to the OT analogy. All OTs in Quebec must complete the portfolio every year, regardless of number of years' experience. As soon as someone has completed their clinical occupational therapy degree at the university level, they're considered a competent OT and ready to work in any field. The portfolio requirement is not there to question our competency to work. It's to motivate us to improve on our competencies and to become even better occupational therapists. You see where I'm going with this? The same goes for spiritual lives. Striving to make a positive change does not mean that we've been doing things badly or that we've been horrible human beings. It just means that our lives could be better than they are now. And just as the process of reviewing my clinical practice makes me more aware of how things are, I then automatically try to improve. The same goes for spirituality. When we are more aware of our lives and areas to improve, we automatically start to behave to follow the changed thinking pattern or focus. So if we were putting together a spiritual portfolio, where would we start? What would our goals be for this year? Now, trying to set a goal, I know, can be very difficult. So might I suggest that there are 2 components to spirituality, concrete versus abstract, or doing versus being. And any goal really would fall into one of these 2 categories. You might say that you want to spend more time with God, or to question further our ethics and what God thinks of them. I might want to show more people that I care about them. I might want to know more of the Bible stories. So, and here are some ideas for continuing education activities, and these are not a complete list. So for concrete or doing activities, it could include caring for others, advocating for fair play in the world, reading the Bible, discussing theology and how it impacts your life, and taking a role in church life. Abstract or being activities might include praying, fellowship, meditating, and enjoying God's creation. Now, there's actually a link to the Bible reading today. Pure fluke, I absolutely assure you. But both the being and the doing are addressed in the New Testament reading today. We actually see that there's learning and teaching about God, fellowship with the Bible, so some doing, praying to God, so being, sharing what we have with others, and taking care of people who have less than us. How do we choose a goal? How? Now, I don't have an answer because each person would have a different goal. But again, an analogy with an occupational therapist approach. It's good to start with where you're at and what you're doing right now. For example, I am a mental health occupational therapist. It would make sense, and it does make sense, for me to learn more about mental health conditions, recommended treatments, new counseling techniques. It would not make sense for me to learn about post-operation rehabilitation for cardiac surgery. because there's no point with what I do now. Now, it doesn't mean that post-operation rehabilitation information has no use at all. If you have cardiac surgery, let me assure you that you want your OT on that unit to have that information. But the information has no relevance or pertinence to my work right now. It's equally important in our spiritual lives to find something that is pertinent and relevant to who we are and what our lives are about right now. And really, it should be something that ties in with something that we already enjoy. How do you do this? Okay, again, I'm not an expert, but I'm going to take the favorite goal of, I really should pray more. Now, this is usually said with a tone of just, oh, this is going to be such a chore. But really, the question is not, I should do this, or how am I going to force myself to do it, but how do I incorporate prayer into my life so that it doesn't become a chore, but instead becomes an activity that I actually enjoy and see as valuable time spent with God, just as I would enjoy and value time spent with a really good friend. There are a lot of stereotypes about prayer. The main one being how we pray in church, sitting on a hot bench, hands folded, and eyes closed. But that doesn't have to be the only type of prayer that you do. For example, okay, is there anyone here on the flower field? Okay. No? Okay. This is nothing, just you'll follow me. If you like flower arranging, so you like going into your garden, you like choosing flowers, cutting flowers, arranging them, you may find that you can easily incorporate prayer into flower arranging, and you may be able to pray as you're picking and arranging them. As you choose them from the garden, you could thank God for His creation. As you arrange them, you could pray for the people who are going to see them and who will have their lives enriched by what you're making. Now, there are other people in the world, such as myself, who do not arrange flowers. I have an understanding with flowers. They look pretty and I do not arrange them. The world is a better place for this. There is a lot less stress in the world. I, however, love to walk, I love to bike, hike, swim, canoe, and I can pray while doing these things. I can pray while walking to work, while hiking up a mountain. I can pray while floating on my back and looking at the sky while I'm in a lake. I can pray while I'm canoeing. It works for me. This prayer style works for me. Flower arranging and prayer for me, not going to work. If you hate walking, it is unlikely that you're going to develop your spiritual life while hiking up a mountain. Because God, why did you make this mountain so big, is not going to develop your spiritual life. Now, please don't think that I've got my prayer life all figured out, because I'm just going to point out to you the number of mountains and lakes on the West Island. My point is that we all need to find our own ways of developing our spiritual lives according to who we are. And there's no particular prescription that will work for everyone, because ultimately we all have a God-given uniqueness that includes both creativity and personality. So what would we like to change this year? And if God reviewed the portfolio at the end of the year, what would we like Him to see? Now, I have a slightly crazy thought, but imagine if we each had one spiritual goal each year that carried over into the following years. Can you imagine how holy we would be after just 5 years? Both as individuals and as a community, how holy would we be? It was a little wild thought. So we know we need to look after our body and our brain, and it's equally important to look after our spirit. God created us with a lot of potential, and He wants us to meet it. If we never question, we never change, we never strive for better, never create spiritual development routines, we will not achieve the full potential that God has in mind for us. Our challenge is to regularly review our spiritual life and to create that portfolio that will help us meet the potential that God has given